Amelia sat on her bed, her silk robe barely clinging to her shoulders. Michael stepped in, wiping his sweaty brow. "Ma'am, you called me?" he asked. She approached him slowly, her voice low. "Michael," she began, her eyes lingering on him. "Your pencil is what I need. I love the way it stands its length. Its size, it's everything I've been craving." Michael froze, his towel slipping slightly as he stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am," he stammered, shifting uncomfortably. "This is not right. You're my boss's wife." "I'll increase your salary," Amelia interrupted, stepping closer, her eyes locking onto his with a determination that sent his protests scattering. "I don't care about right or wrong anymore. I need this. I need you." Michael backed away, shaking his head. "But ma'am, what if?" "No buts, Michael," she cut him off, her tone firm yet pleading. "Just say yes, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again." The grand ballroom shimmered with gold chandeliers and delicate floral arrangements, the scent of roses and lavender filling the air. Amelia stood at the center of it all, her pristine white gown hugging her figure as she smiled at the camera flashes. This was her fairy tale, the one she'd dreamt of since she was a little girl. Ethan, her billionaire husband, stood beside her, beaming with pride as guests congratulated them. As she glanced at him, her heart swelled. Ethan was everything she'd prayed for: wealthy, handsome, and respectful. After years of heartbreak with men who either cheated or broke her spirit, she had vowed never to settle for less. This time, she had chosen stability over passion. Love could grow, she thought. Their honeymoon in Paris was luxurious, filled with expensive gifts, breathtaking sights, and romantic dinners. But when the doors closed and it was just the two of them, Amelia began to notice cracks in the perfect picture. It started on their wedding night. She had waited, nerves tingling with anticipation, for Ethan to claim her as his wife. But the moment was over as quickly as it began, leaving her feeling hollow. At first, she brushed it off, blaming exhaustion. But as days turned into weeks, the pattern became clear. Ethan's small pencil left her yearning for something more. One night, unable to bear the silence anymore, she turned to him in bed. "Ethan," she began, her voice shaky but resolute. He responded, not even looking up from his phone. "Don't you think we need to talk about us?" He finally looked at her, his brows slightly furrowed. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of the blanket. "I mean, intimacy. Don't you think it's important?" He sighed, setting his phone on the nightstand. "Amelia, intimacy isn't food. We're adults. We don't need to act like teenagers. There's more to marriage than that." His tone was dismissive, and the finality in his words stung like a slap. She watched as he turned his back to her, pulling the covers up to his shoulders. Amelia sat in the darkness, her chest tightening with frustration and longing. It wasn't just about the physical act, it was the connection, the vulnerability, the affirmation of love that she craved. But Ethan didn't seem to understand, or worse, he didn't care. In the months that followed, she tried everything to reignite their passion. She cooked his favorite meals wearing nothing but an apron as she served him, hoping to spark a reaction. He barely looked up from his phone. She wore the sexiest lingerie she could find, standing in front of the mirror as he walked into the room. His only comment was, "Don't you feel cold?" Once, she even slid her hands over his chest while he was working, pressing herself against him. "Not now, Amelia," he said, without even glancing at her. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence, leaving her feeling invisible and unwanted. The nights became lonelier, the silence between them more oppressive. She couldn't help but wonder if this was her punishment for rushing into marriage after a string of heartbreaks. But beneath her growing resentment lay a deep yearning for love, for connection, for someone who saw her as more than a wife, more than a responsibility. She wanted to feel desired, cherished, alive. And soon, her desperation would lead her to a temptation she never expected. Amelia first noticed Michael, their gatekeeper, one sunny afternoon. He was crouched beside one of Ethan's luxury SUVs, changing a tire with practiced ease. His shirt clung to his broad chest, soaked with sweat that glistened under the sunlight. Each muscle in his arms flexed as he worked, his biceps straining with effortless strength. Unlike Ethan, who barely acknowledged her presence, Michael always greeted her warmly, his deep, melodic voice carrying a quiet charm that lingered long after he spoke. "Ma'am, how is everything?" he would ask, his shy smile revealing perfect white teeth. That day, Amelia's gaze lingered a little too long. She noticed how the waistband of his trousers sat low on his hips, his athletic physique undeniable. A warmth stirred within her that she hadn't felt in months. Over time, she began to notice other things about him, the way he was always attentive, quick to respond to her requests, and how his presence seemed to fill the silent void Ethan had left behind. One afternoon, the gas cylinder knob in the kitchen got stuck. Frustrated, Amelia called out for Michael, expecting his usual prompt response. When there was no answer, she walked to his quarters at the far end of the compound, the sun beating down on her bare shoulders. "Michael," she called again, knocking on his door. The faint sound of running water came from inside, and she realized he was in the shower. The door was slightly ajar, and curiosity whispered in her ear, urging her to take a peek. She hesitated, but her feet betrayed her resolve. She pushed the door open just enough to see him through the gap in the bathroom door. Her breath hitched. Michael stood under the stream of water, his skin glistening as droplets ran down his powerful shoulders and defined abs. But what truly captured her attention was his pencil. It was magnificent long, thick, and perfectly sculpted, unlike anything she had ever imagined. A surge of heat rushed through her body, and she quickly backed away, her heart pounding. By the time she returned to the main house, her face was flushed, and her thoughts were a whirlwind of guilt and longing. The image of Michael haunted her in the days that followed, invading her dreams. Her mind replayed that moment over and over again. Soon, she found excuses to interact with him. Her casual conversations with him became laced with flirtation, her fingers brushing his hand. When she handed him something, her lingering gaze holding his for just a second too long. One evening, as Michael carried a bag of groceries into the kitchen, Amelia decided she couldn't hold back any longer. The tension inside her had reached a breaking point. "Michael," she said, her voice soft yet firm. He turned to her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Yes, ma'am?" She took a deep breath, stepping closer until there was barely any space between them. "Your pencil," she whispered, her eyes locking with his. "It's what I need." Michael froze, his eyes widening in shock. "Ma'am, I don't understand." "I've seen it," she interrupted, her cheeks flushing as she confessed. "That day in your bathroom I saw it, and it's everything I've been missing." Her voice dropped lower, trembling with desire. "I need you, Michael." His gaze darted to the floor, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "Ma'am, this is wrong. You're married to the boss." She stepped even closer, her hand brushing lightly against his chest. "No one will know. Ethan doesn't care about me. But you can give me what I've been craving." "Ma'am, please." She cut him off, her fingers sliding down his chest, lingering near his waist. "You're the only one who can make me feel alive." Again, Michael's resolve wavered as her touch ignited something deep within him. His breath quickened, his body betraying his hesitation. That night, when the house was quiet and the world outside seemed to stand still, Amelia invited him into her room. What began with hesitant touches quickly turned into an explosion of passion. Michael was everything Ethan wasn't: intense, attentive, and eager to please. For the first time in years, Amelia felt truly alive, her body trembling under the weight of satisfaction she had long forgotten. As their affair deepened, Amelia found herself addicted to the fire Michael ignited in her. She knew it was wrong, but every stolen moment with him felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost. The affair continued in secret, each encounter more intoxicating than the last. Amelia knew she was treading on dangerous ground, yet she found herself unable to resist. Michael became her escape, his touch igniting a fire she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. Their stolen moments, whether in the secluded corners of the house or in the stillness of the night, were filled with raw passion and a growing sense of guilt. Ethan remained oblivious, his attention consumed by his business ventures and maintaining their social image. He was rarely home, and when he was, his conversations with Amelia revolved around appearances, dinners to attend, deals to finalize, and ensuring their marriage looked perfect from the outside. To Amelia, it felt as though he cared more about his reputation than about her. Months later, Amelia's world shifted when she began experiencing nausea and fatigue. A visit to the doctor confirmed what she already suspected. She was pregnant. The revelation sent a wave of mixed emotions through her. Was the child Ethan's or Michael's? The question haunted her, but she buried her doubts, determined to keep her secret hidden. When she told Ethan, his reaction was nothing short of elation. "Amelia, this is wonderful news," he exclaimed, lifting her off her feet in a rare display of affection. He immediately began making plans, hiring the best decorators for the nursery, and calling friends and family to share the announcement. Ethan's joy was infectious, and soon the house was abuzz with preparations for their child's arrival. He spared no expense, organizing a grand baby shower at a 5-star venue. Guests marveled at the opulence, praising Ethan for his generosity and Amelia for her radiant glow. "Finally, I'll be a father," Ethan said proudly, raising a glass during his speech. "This child is a blessing and proof that hard work and faith pay off. To my beautiful wife, Amelia, you've given me more than I could ever ask for." Amelia smiled, her hands resting on her growing belly, but her heart was heavy with guilt. The applause and congratulations felt hollow, each well-wisher's words like a knife twisting in her chest. She glanced across the room at Michael, who had been assigned to oversee security for the event. His eyes briefly met hers, and in that fleeting moment, she saw the same worry she felt. As the pregnancy progressed, Amelia struggled to keep her secret buried. Ethan's excitement only made her guilt grow, but she reminded herself that she was doing what was necessary to maintain her marriage and her status. 2 years after the twins were born, the whispers in the neighborhood grew louder, spreading like wildfire. Visitors and neighbors couldn't help but comment on the stark differences between the boys. One twin had Ethan's sharp jawline, fair complexion, and piercing eyes, a near replica of his father. The other, however, had a richer, darker skin tone, full lips, and a broad nose that unmistakably mirrored Michael's features. At first, Ethan waved off the comments, attributing the differences to genetics. "Twins don't always look alike," he would say dismissively, though the seed of doubt had been planted. But the murmurs persisted. During a casual gathering, one of the neighbors remarked, "It's funny how one of your boys looks just like your gatekeeper, Michael, don't you think?" The words, spoken half in jest, struck a nerve. That night, Ethan confronted Amelia. His face was set, his eyes dark with suspicion as he closed the bedroom door behind him. "Amelia," he began, his voice deceptively calm, "why does one of our sons look so different from the other?" Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly composed herself, forcing a smile. "They're twins, Ethan. Not all twins are identical." His gaze bore into hers, unrelenting. "This isn't about them being identical, Amelia. People are talking. I'm asking you, why does one of our sons look nothing like me?" She turned away, her hands trembling as she fiddled with the hem of her dress. "Ethan, you're overthinking this. Genetics can be unpredictable." He cut her off, his voice now low and dangerous. "I want a DNA test, tomorrow." Her breath hitched, panic surging through her veins. "A DNA test, Ethan? Is that even necessary? You are their father." His jaw tightened, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I said tomorrow." Amelia nodded weakly, her mind racing with fear. The walls she had carefully built around her secret were beginning to crumble, and she knew there was no escape from the truth. The following morning, Ethan wasted no time arranging for a DNA test. Amelia felt her world spiraling as she accompanied him to the clinic. Michael, unaware of the brewing storm, continued his duties, though he couldn't ignore the anxious glances Amelia cast his way. Days later, the results arrived. Ethan sat on the edge of their bed, the envelope in his trembling hands. Amelia stood across the room, her chest tight as she watched him peel it open. His face hardened as he read the contents. "They're not mine," Ethan said, his voice cold and distant. He looked up, his piercing eyes locking onto Amelia's. "You lied to me. You betrayed me." "Ethan!" she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare!" he interrupted, standing abruptly. "You've made a fool of me, Amelia, in my own home, under my roof." Amelia fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely. You pushed me away." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Lonely? That's your excuse? And who's the father, Amelia? The gateman?" His voice dripped with disdain. Amelia's silence was all the confirmation he needed. Without another word, Ethan stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Meanwhile, Michael noticed the sudden tension in the house. Later that evening, he was summoned to the living room where Ethan stood, arms crossed. Amelia sat on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. Ethan didn't mince words. "Michael, tell me the truth. Did you touch my wife?" Michael froze, his eyes darting between Ethan and Amelia. He wanted to deny it, to protect himself, but the weight of the truth was too heavy. "Olga, I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan erupted, throwing a glass across the room. "Sorry? You're sorry?" He lunged at Michael, but Amelia intervened, stepping between them. "Stop it, Ethan," she cried. "This is my fault. I seduced him. He didn't chase me. If you're going to blame anyone, blame me." Ethan's chest heaved with rage, but he pulled back, his voice eerily calm. "You're both going to pay for this." Ethan wasted no time filing for divorce, stripping Amelia of her social standing and threatening to take custody of the twins, despite knowing one wasn't his. The scandal spread quickly, with whispers and judgment following Amelia wherever she went. Michael, dismissed from his job, became the target of Ethan's wrath as he used his influence to blacklist him in the area. Amelia and Michael, now forced into survival mode, found solace in each other, but the strain of their choices and the judgment from society began to take its toll. After the divorce, Amelia was left with nothing. Ethan ensured she had no access to his wealth, social connections, or even a place to stay. The twins, now a symbol of her betrayal, became her only solace. However, her once proud and glamorous life dissolved into despair. Unable to endure the constant judgment from society, she and Michael fled to the outskirts of town, renting a small, dilapidated apartment. But life was crueler than they anticipated. Michael struggled to find work due to Ethan's influence, and they barely scraped by. Amelia, once filled with passion and desire, became a shadow of herself. The weight of her guilt and the disdain from the world began to twist her emotions, turning her love for Michael into resentment. "This is your fault," she would spit at him during arguments. "If you hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't be here." Michael, already burdened by his own guilt, could only endure her scorn in silence. Ethan's life, on the surface, remained perfect. But inside, he seethed with anger and humiliation. Every time he looked at his legitimate son, he saw betrayal. Every time he heard whispers at social gatherings, he felt the sting of ridicule. Driven by his thirst for revenge, Ethan paid a private investigator to keep tabs on Amelia and Michael. He discovered their squalid living conditions and decided it wasn't enough. They hadn't suffered enough. One night, he sent a group of men to their home with a message. The men broke in, smashing furniture, threatening Mustafa, and leaving a clear warning. "This is Ethan's town! You don't belong here!" Amelia and Michael were shaken, but Ethan's cruelty only escalated. He sent pictures of the twins to Michael with a note, "You don't deserve to call them yours." Amelia, unraveling under the weight of it all, began to believe the world would be better off without her. The children, innocent as they were, became a constant reminder of her sins. One stormy night, overwhelmed by guilt and anger, she locked herself in the bathroom with the twins. Michael banged on the door, begging her to open it. When she finally did, her face was blank, her voice chilling. "I can't do this anymore. I can't let them live in this shame." Terrified, Michael grabbed the twins and fled the apartment, but the damage was already done. The neighbors, hearing the commotion, called the authorities, and Amelia was taken in for a psychiatric evaluation. With Amelia institutionalized, Michael was left alone with the children. But the weight of being a single father, coupled with Ethan's relentless harassment, broke him. Desperate for money, he turned to petty crime, eventually landing in jail after being caught stealing food. While in prison, he received a final letter from Ethan. Inside was a single picture of the twins, smiling happily at Ethan's mansion with the words, "They're better off without you." Years later, the twins, now grown, were raised as Ethan's children. They knew nothing of Michael or the true story of their birth. Ethan ensured they received the best education, but his cold, controlling demeanor left them emotionally distant. As for Amelia, she spent her remaining years in a psychiatric facility, haunted by the choices she made. And Michael? He disappeared after his release from prison, his fate unknown. In the end, their story became a cautionary tale, whispered across town, a reminder of how betrayal and desire could destroy lives, leaving nothing but shadows in their wake.